social isolation, aggression, bullying, and depression. And considering also that the Nelson Mandela Rules of 2015, which are the UN standard minimum rules for the treatment of prisoners, states that they should be given all reasonable facilities to communicate with their family and friends and for receiving visits from them. And having looked at the physical structure of remand yard in our last inquiry, this committee now turns to evaluating how remand detention affects the mental health and the family's relationships and family life of remandees. And it's with that in mind that our inquiry this morning focuses on determining the impact on mental health and family life of remandees at Remand Prison and evaluating the programs and services to mitigate against the effect of detention on the remandees at remand prisons. I want to thank those who are here with us in our oral hearing and also acknowledge the receipt of submissions from the Ministry of Health, the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service. We also received 150 questionnaires completed by remandees at remand prisons located at Port of Spain and Golden Grove. We received submissions from Vision on a Mission, the Association of Psychiatrists of Trinidad and Tobago, Professor Ramesh Deosaran, and also the judiciary. And we do thank all who would have given us the written submissions. At this time, I would like to invite brief opening remarks from, and we will take it in this order that I'm going to call, Mr. Vel Lewis, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of National Security, Mr. William Alexander, Commissioner of Prisons, Mr. Richard Madre, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Health, Mr. Wayne Chance, Executive President, Vision on a Mission, and Dr. Dominic Nukolo from the Association of Psychiatrists of Trinidad and Tobago. So I'll call that order again: Mr. Vel Lewis, Mr. William Alexander, Mr. Richard Madre, Mr. Wayne Chance, and Dr. Dominic Nukolo.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the Joint Select Committee. I thank you for the opportunity to appear before this committee looking into the mental health and family life of persons at the remand prison. Mental health and family life of remandees have been areas for particular attention from members of our prison service for many years. Many mentally ill offenders come to the remand prison with a variety of disorders, including schizophrenia, depression, bipolar disorder, delusional disorders, and drug-induced psychosis. And while some experts would argue that many people who come to the remand prison with a mental illness will ultimately find themselves living in conditions which can make or contribute to their condition worsening, I want to assure this committee and members of the public that the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service works tirelessly to ensure that this is not the case in Trinidad and Tobago. Indeed, the Prison Service, and by extension the Ministry of National Security, have developed a program of monitoring and treatment for remandees with mental health challenges. This program has been put in place with the recognition that mentally ill offenders need to be offered the care necessary to enable them to function at a level that would allow them to live with other offenders and ultimately to be ready for life whenever they are released back into their communities. I would hasten to add, though, that there is a recognition that this program can be expanded and strengthened, and therefore, the Ministry of National Security will explore further inexpensive interventions and services and continue to dedicate resources to this issue. In this context, I am pleased to participate in this hearing with the hope that by its conclusion, we will be in a better position to address more effectively the mental health needs of remandees and to improve the health and quality of life both of remandees with mental disorders and the wider prison population as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mr. William Alexander.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, all those present, I would firstly like to publicly acknowledge the hard work of dedicated prison officers who, notwithstanding several challenges, especially recently, have stuck to their task and maintained their oath in holding and treating their clients. We will continue to so do, and I want to encourage those who may be intimidated or feel pain at this time. Your commissioner is in your corner. God is on our side. The Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service's motto, to hold and treat, indicates that we are required by law to commit persons on a warrant into custody and care. This includes persons from differing and diverse backgrounds and temperament. As a result, they pose several challenges. They include mentally ill persons, drug addicts, violent people. Several theorists, however, have concluded that the custodial environment is not the ideal place for housing and treating individuals with mental illnesses. Based on their conclusions, for several years, the psychiatric community has embarked on a deinstitutionalized approach of treating and managing mentally ill persons. We must recognize environment affects behavior. And while we deliberate today, I want us to be conscious that there is so much and only so much a prison can do. Notwithstanding that, we at the Prison Service, in keeping with our motto, have developed processes and mechanisms to treat with these challenged persons. We have access to clinics that are available in the public space. We have programs that we have created to release the stress level. We have also embarked on programs to reunite the families so that they get this social support. All in all, I look forward to this session this morning, that we can exchange and deliberate on issues and ideas to create a better environment for our citizens. Though they may be mentally challenged, they have rights and they have to be treated with dignity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Mr. Madrid.
Good morning again. The Ministry of Health has a key role to provide relevant health services to prisoners, including those who have mental health challenges, amongst all others. In doing so, we aim to provide those services as effectively as possible and to support the Ministry of Health as far as we can in the fulfillment of that organization's responsibilities. I look forward to this inquiry, and we will attempt to respond to your questions as fully and as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Madrid. Mr. Wayne Chance.
Madam Chairman, other members of the head table, Vision and Mission is a non-profit organization, an NGO, that works in the field of correction within the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service. We work in the area of preparing inmates for release to return to their communities, to help them to reintegrate and resettle back into the wider society of Trinidad and Tobago. We work with the population we work with is very dynamic. The demographics is very broad, and the challenge faced by these inmates to have them resettle, both foreign and local, is very compelling. There's a number of barriers we faced in being successful in terms of the kind of success rate we would like to have as it relates to this particular area of focus this morning, as it relates to the number of inmates that goes into the prison not properly diagnosed or assessed as it relates to their mental or psychiatric disorder. And the prison in its current circumstances don't holistically address those challenges while within the prison system. And for the years or time spent, a lot of times those major areas may not be totally or completely addressed, and therefore, upon their release, it continued to be a major challenge. So I'm happy to be here to exchange ideas, thoughts, and make recommendations as it relates to addressing this major issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chance. And Dr. Nokolo?
Yes, thank you, everybody. I'm Dr. Mukolo, as I said. I'm a member of the Association of Psychiatrists of Trinidad and Tobago, a 50-odd membership organization, of which at any point in time has 20 of them being psychiatrists and others being doctors working in the same. And our members are integrally involved in the care of the prison population, because the public health of the prison services mental health is it's an extension of the public mental health services of Trinidad and Tobago. And these services are offered through the staff of the St. Anne's Hospital, who are also members of the Association of Psychiatrists, and hence how I came to be charged with this assignment, seeing that I've worked with the prison services. I have, over the years, offered assist in the running of the clinics, psychiatric clinics in the prison. And here we're talking specifically about remandees, who are persons who are facing charges before the court. And from our experience, from my experience, no studies has been done locally in this group as to what the percentage of mental health illnesses is. But if one is to go by international standards, especially in systems that are similar to us, specifically the United Kingdom, one could safely say about 20 to 30% of remandees do have mental health issues. And by similar studies, it's been deemed that only about 25% of them, a quarter of them, and possibly up to half in our own unique system. Because from my having worked with the prison services, I understand that the prison services, they have medical officers working with them who help in picking up these mental health issues, and they have some prison officers who are trained mental health nurses. I do not know the exact proportion, but having seen them in training and met them through the clinic, I know they do have. So the modus operandi of these clinics are that they are run twice monthly for the main prisons, and it's at those prisons that remand yard prisoners are brought to be seen. And the remand yard prisoners are seen, and they do come with various conditions, you understand? And the 20 to 30% I said that are mentally ill does not include persons who are substance dependent, people who abuse substances, which we do know, but that is usually not considered a big problem, except as it relates to the impact it has on their mental health too, either through the psychosis that could emanate from the use of such substances, or even the withdrawal some do suffer while in remand, coming off substances. And hence the high prevalence of depression and psychosis particularly. We know that being remanded must be hard on persons who prior to that had enjoyed freedom, so that this brings about stress that they try to adjust to, and a few of them do succumb to that. And also, we do know that some of them have mental illnesses that they were laboring with before being remanded in prison. And these sometimes either get noticed because they stop taking their medication, or they were never treated in the first place, which is an opportunity I'll talk about later. And so in running this clinic, we do offer these services of treating, diagnosing, and following up these persons. There is a small percentage of them that also come to the attention of mental health services via the court, because when these remandees go to court and the judge observes that they have a mental health issue, it's usually deemed important to ascertain the extent of it and if it had any impact on the crime committed, or if it does, if it will in any particular way hinder or interfere with the court proceedings. Hence, they are sent directly to sentence. And the way the prison operates is that most people we see in clinic are treated in the prison, because the prison has its own infirmary that stocks mental health medication. So they do report to us, and we follow up with treatment with these persons. If they need admission because they're either too disturbed to recover properly in prison, I do understand that the Minister of National Security is usually charged with giving the go-ahead to move them from prison to sentence. But this is not very common or often. And the diagnoses we usually see we do see adjustment disorders with depressed mood, depression, acute psychosis, relapses of schizophrenia, and substance abuse. The positives that one could draw from the remand is that there are lots of inmates, or remandees, I should say, who interface in mental health services for the first time thanks to having been remanded, because that's for those who suffer untreated mental health issues. We do see those who access treatment for the first time via the remand process. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nicolo, for that submission. At this point, we'll move into the questioning stage of our public hearing. And just to remind officials and members of the committee to direct your questions through the chair as we proceed. And let me ask the first question as we go along. Various submissions have indicated that there's strong reasoning to conclude that the conditions of remand yard can lead to mental issues in persons that did not present with those issues before. And there's also an assertion that, that prisoners are a high-risk population for developing mental health problems. So given the fact that these assertions are being made, is there any data, is anyone doing any type of monitoring that would indicate that persons in remand yard under the present conditions are developing a higher level of mental illness than maybe the outside population, or if they are presenting with mental illnesses on coming in, that they are being worsened at a faster rate than the outside population because of the conditions within the remand yard? Is anyone doing that type of research, and do we have statistics that relate to Trinidad and Tobago? It's an open question to any one of the representatives.
What I can say, we keep statistics, and we do not see any significant changes in numbers between persons who are coming in and who are staying there for a period of time, because the officers would be interchanging with these persons. And sometimes they are the first persons to observe any abnormal characteristics. And they would then refer them to the prison medical officer, who would then refer them to the psychiatrist. And I must say, I was looking through my statistics here, and I'm not seeing any great jump or cluster to indicate or to support that assertion. But I will say, as I said in my opening remark, environment will impact people. And there are some persons who may have an inclination to mental illness, and the environment can bring it out because the restriction, the depression that they go through could lead to these things. But our statistics are pretty level when it comes to persons being treated in the prison for psychiatric illness or mental illness.
So is there any record that persons who have come in without presenting, in one of the submissions, we saw that 80% of the remandees are not tested psychiatrically when they come into the prison. So is there any baseline data that would indicate persons who came in without mental illness problems and would have developed those along the way?
Yesterday we were discussing that there's no such baseline. That is expensive and resource intensive to pursue at this time, but it is something that needs to be done. I have a position on this, that the prison affects the society in a very significant way. And if we don't pay attention to the prison, the society will be affected. Remember, the persons who come to prison are those persons who break the law. Those persons who have the tendency to be bold, and they can discomfort your life, whether as a result of criminal action, drug use, mental illness. We do not have any way of baselining everybody that comes into the prison. That may be something that we need to look at. And I'm not aware of any research that has been carried out in the prison that will give you an answer to the question that you ask.
Hello. Could I say something?
Sure.
Yeah. I think the answer to the question is no. That we have no studies of incidence rates of mental illness in the population generally versus incidence rates of mental illnesses in the prison population. For example, incidence rates would refer to things like number of new cases per 100,000 per year. So that has never been done in Trinidad, such comparisons. The second part is there are no studies to compare relapse rates of mental illnesses in the general population versus relapse rates of mental illnesses in the prison population. So as far as I am aware, those studies have not been done, and the answer is no.
Madam Chair, if I may, on that same issue.
Sure.
This speaks to the whole aspect in terms of if we really want to move to a position of corrections, modern corrections. And in modern day corrections, screening instrument tool for mental illness is integral as part of your reception and induction of all prisoners. And this is not totally blame, is that we have to start thinking in terms of if we really want to address these mental health issues, there must be a particular mandate that all inmates, when they come in, they must be screened for mental illness by trained professionals, and that would require the prison to have a psychological department with psychologists, psychiatrists, and the like to do that kind of in-depth screening. Because it's not only in terms of for illnesses, but for the well-being, right? And how these people are able to adjust. So we are looking at two things really. Those who probably would come in with mental illness, but how can we do a diagnostic to see where the mental functioning of individuals, and to see through the screening to see where they are, and then do assessment to see if they are being impacted negatively and the like. So it speaks to that particular screening tool, so that we can really get at that research capability.
Okay, thank you. Senator Moses.
Thank you very much, Chair. For mental illnesses that are not apparent at first glance, such as personality disorders or depression, how does the remand facility determine if the remandee is experiencing personality disorders? It's an open question, open in the sense that anyone can answer.
We didn't get the question.
You didn't get the question.
Okay. For mental illnesses that are not apparent at first glance, such as personality disorders or depression, how does the remand facility determine whether the remandee is experiencing personality disorders.
As you said, mental illnesses that are not easily detectable, especially personality disorders, will remain that, because personality disorders are particularly difficult to diagnose. It requires longitudinal view of the person, not a point view, you understand? So that it's not usually the most problematic of the mental health illnesses, because even treatment for them are not easily available nor effective. So that the persons involved do not really suffer much when it comes to personality disorder. As for depression, depression can be picked up by screening tools fairly easily. Does that answer it, please?
Partially so. I was thinking more across time, with the passage of time, the procedure that would be involved in ascertaining whether the remandee that is suffering from any particular disorder. Over time, not necessarily at a particular point on entry into the facility.
And that speaks to the capability of the officers, because in interacting with fellow prisoners and a prison officer, they usually know who's problematic or who has particular pattern of behavior that calls itself to attention, or persons that are withdrawn, refusing to eat or not bathing or self-harming. There are ample signs that trained officers could pick up to know that this person should warrant some further investigation.
And I think that's where the question lies. What is the capability of the prison officers? Are they exposed to that kind of training to be able to pick that up?
Hello. To answer your question directly, the diagnostics like a diagnosis of personality disorders is quite a detailed thing that must be done by a team of psychiatrists and especially psychologists who go through long instruments with 500 questions or more. So that is not happening at this stage in the prison service. Whatever diagnostics in the prison services would depend on the clinical acumen of the prison officers who might notice something and who might then report that, if they wish, to a generally trained doctor who may or may not know much about psychiatric conditions. So it is far from ideal. Most of these patients will go missed because they are not getting a formal assessment by a trained team of persons. For example, at St. Anne's, we do have about 4 psychologists in the forensic department, and they do extensive work in diagnostics regarding personality disorders. And we do more of the depression and all of that. So in my opinion, it would be less than ideal what is happening right now.
Could I say something on the topic, please?
Okay, let's just get the commissioner to weigh in here.
Let me inform the committee, we have working in the prison qualified psychiatrists and psychologists and medical people. We have officers who are psychiatric nurses. As Dr. Dominic said, you will have to observe a person with personality disorder over a period of time. The goodly doctor just now spoke about the complicated and technicalities involved in it. But what we do notice is that an individual over time, because he'll be in a cell with some inmate, and that inmate will complain. This guy seems to be strange. 1 minute he seems to be this, next minute he seems to be that. And that is, most often is what starts the process, where this person will be interviewed by the informing officer, placed before the doctor, and if the doctor is convinced that it's not just the vagaries of the imprisonment as it behaving that way, we have a welfare team who will also get data from the family. Because sometimes people come to visit and they'll say, that boy very strange, you know. And they will give you information that will cause you to cause this inmate to be placed before the psychologist or the psychiatrist. So this is what the reality is in the prison.
Could I, Madam Chair, on the issue? And this begs the issue in that there must be what you call a standard procedure in terms of if you're going to be interviewing your inmates incarcerated, if it's every 3 months, every 4 months, and the like, not only in terms of screening, but having them placed before the doctor, having them placed before the psychiatrist and the like. Yes, it's a lot of work, but if we're talking about corrections, that is how corrections operate in terms of processes, in terms of timelines for classification and reclassification, assessment, reassessment, so that you can actually develop a profile on each person. So there's a lot of work, and it's going to be expensive, but if we want to move to the point of corrections and addressing those mental issues, there is no way of getting away from it. We have to have the instruments. You must have the personnel, the trained personnel at all levels, from prison officers and the professionals.
Senator Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. With your permission, I'd like to make 2 small comments on 1 question. I want to remind myself and all of us sitting in this room here that we are servants in this beautiful country. And on that note, I want to pay commendations to the Commissioner of Prison and your team for the excellent work that you are doing despite the constraints. And I'd like to say also to Mr. Wayne Chance on Vision and Mission that you all have been human service to Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to compliment you on your team. I have 1 question. Who assesses behavior to establish that it is questionable behavior at the prisons? They have questionable behavior, and I would like to know who assesses this questionable behavior.
That would be to the Commissioner of Prisons.
Well, as I said, we have psychiatrists and psychologists in the prison. But I think we have a team of persons, but in the first instance, the person who interacts most often with the inmate is the officer.
Okay.
And some years ago, we started a training program at St. Anne's. I managed to recognize Dr. Ramtahal. I don't know if he remembers me. Where we, on a regular basis, we would send persons to St. Anne's, not only to do the theoretical aspect, but the practical, working along with mentally unstable people. But we at the prison have a questionnaire sheet here that was drafted over time. And we ask these questions. Are you a previous psychiatric case? Are you on medication? Were you ever on medication? And according to the responses here, then we send it up for action. So there's a process. What I will like to see is there has to be more effort. Recognize that the prison population is increasing. That will impact on the resources. Recognize that there's a downturn in the economy. When there's a downturn in the economy, crime increases. The prison population increases. We have to sit down and strategize before that time reach, or before the situation develop into something that we cannot control. Now is the time for all of us, all the stakeholders, to put our intellect to use and improve the situation. It will also help in reoffending, because if we could ideally deal with persons who have issues, they are disgruntled, violent, aggressive, unstable people, all because they think nobody cares about them, nobody's addressing their issues. And if we could do that, it will have a spill-off effect in reducing crime. People want to be felt and appreciated and treated in a humane fashion. This is why sometimes it worries me when persons make unfounded accusations as though prison officers have no heart for people, but that is foolishness. Prison officers go beyond the call of duty, sit down for hours talking with persons, advising them. We have created additional visits outside of what the rules call for. Because according to the prison rules, you're entitled, remanded inmates are entitled to 2 visits per week, convicted 1. We have changed that in instances where persons are demonstrating good behavior. We give them a weekend visit. We have Father's Day activities. We have a number of things to reunite the family. When a prisoner will come to you and say that he has a 14-year-old child that is given problem and he feels if he speaks with him, he'll be able to get to him. The welfare comes in, visit the family, make sure that the family is in agreement, that there's no friction, whatever, and they meet and they discuss. There are a number of work that goes on behind the prison walls that the population is not aware of, and we help maintain safety and security in this island of ours, because if those persons are left unattended and that hate builds up, then we will be in trouble. So what we're looking for is assistance, stakeholders consultation. We don't know it all, neither does any single individual. But when we come together, I think there's enough talent in Trinidad and Tobago to make this place a beautiful place, a paradise. I know it, I am on the face of the earth for a little while now, and I know when persons had this traditional value of neighborliness, everyone looking out for one another. You pass by me on a weekend, I have an extra pot so that you could get extra. Community spirit, we need to rebuild that.
Commissioner, if I could just interrupt, I know that we can go
Thank you.
from today till tomorrow.
Okay.
But I want to assure you that we do, as a country, understand the constraints, and what we are about in this committee today is looking at the systems that are in place and how we can improve those systems so that things would be better for the prison officers as well as for the remandees and the general prison population.
I appreciate.
So we are all about finding the solutions this morning. If I take the submission, I'm seeing 2 hands. I think I saw the official from Ministry of Health first, and then we'll take Mr. Chance.
Okay. Mr. Hussain, to answer your question directly, it is grossly unfair and unreasonable to ask a lay person to determine the presence of mental illness in somebody. That is like me asking you if you could look at your neighbor and tell if they have heart disease, if they have Cushing's disease, if they have had, adrenal problems, liver function disease, any other illness. It is one and the same. So I think the system is far from ideal now. Determination of mental illnesses requires a well-trained doctor. Even GPs miss diagnoses of mental illness, and even psychiatrists themselves. So I think it is grossly unfair to leave it up to a layperson in an institution to make such a determination.
Mr. Chance?
Okay, in response to your question as it relates to mechanism and hearing the contribution of the commissioner, there is an excellent contribution and services that the commissioner and his team provide at the prison system. However, in light of the budgetal and economic constraints, to improve the level of mechanism within the prison in terms of information sharing can definitely go a long way in terms of getting the desired result. For example, case management, how information is shared. If someone is coming out of the prison, how information is shared as it relates to that person's mental issues during the prison. Sometimes those information is not passed on. Follow-up and case management are not there to prevent and to assist in keeping that person on the straight path, so to speak, to keep him following up with his clinic dates and so forth. So a lot of times we receive persons who come out of the prison system and we will not have a comprehensive, and I know there will be classified information that will not be permitted, but however, for those information that is necessary to continue to follow up with this client is not all the time 100%, and therefore there is breakdown in the system. And if these areas can be amended, then, and these areas does not require major financial injection. It's a matter of information sharing, communication that could reduce the level of incidents that we are seeing. So I would just call for greater communication in terms of the case management of these clientele.
Thank you, Mr. Chance. Senator Mahabir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A brief follow-up in relation to what Dr. Ramtahal has said, and it's a follow-up to a question of the direct question of Senator Kazim Hussain. And that is, we were told that the first contact with the prisoner is the prison officer. And we know in the police service, there is a training module for police officers to deal with lawbreakers who may be suffering from some mental ailment. And I'm simply wondering whether, notwithstanding the comment of Dr. Ramtahal, it is possible for all prison officers to be exposed to some type of training, so that, I know they're laypersons, so that because they are in initial contact on a daily basis, they will be able to provide some preliminary assessment and alert the 4 or 5 psychiatrists you have that maybe in cell number 14, there is a case you might want to see that you may have overlooked. So is it possible for the Ministry of Health, specialists in psychology and psychiatry, to provide a training module simply to evaluate individuals by interactions on who may or may not have a problem in the prisons? Or is it, do you think that that is impossible to do? Because that's a potential solution, you see. Yes, I see Dr. Nkolo, yes, and then I think Dr. Ramtahal may want to answer.
Yes. I want to at least draw attention to the scope of what we engage with. And I hope we're not trying to make sure that everybody that ever passes through prison comes out a saint or mentally healthy. Mental illness is a very broad thing. I won't be surprised if some of us in this room are not mentally ill and without treatment, and we're going about our lives, which is part of human right. Mental illness is one of those illnesses which sometimes do not cause distress to the sufferer or anybody. And yet, other times, the only aspect of the mental illness is distress to others, as in personality disorders. And this is the hardest to treat of mental illnesses, because the sufferers feel very good about the way they feel. So they do refuse treatment. And even with depression and mental illnesses that cause distress, they are very difficult to treat because sufferers usually have the option to refuse treatment. And they do refuse treatment far more than any other illnesses. And to at least add my perspective to what Dr. Ramtahal has said about detecting mental illnesses, we're not asking the prisons officers to diagnose. And mental illnesses are picked up by relatives who are not trained at all. The layperson can easily detect significant mental differences. And we all know it. We all know, how are you moving so? How are you speaking so? Why are you always cutting himself? And that goes a long way. I'm not against improvement by providing and enhanced screening tools, you understand? But we must be very aware that we are here to offer those who are in distress and in prison respite. Not those who are happy the way they are and not necessarily disturbing everybody, which will overload our already limited system. If resources were unlimited, of course, I'll be the first on that bandwagon. Screen all of them, treat all of them, follow them up for life. But we have to really optimize these resources. I just want to at least give that perspective.
Somebody else wanted to weigh in on this?
Just one final point, and I don't want to sound repetitive. If we are running, in the realm of corrections, a screening tool for mental illness, for substance abuse, all those things must be introduced. That's what they call good practice, and it works.
If I may ask a question, I seem to recall on our previous inquiry that the prison service would have advanced that upon entry to remand yard, the prisoners are, the detainees, sorry, are seen by a medical doctor to deal with their physical state. And if that is a routine practice and it's not done for the mental side of it, I'm asking, is it that we place more emphasis on their physical condition than their mental condition? And if this is so, should it be so?
When an inmate comes into prison, he comes with a warrant, and there's a whole number of actions that have to be taken. From the documentation, checking to see if the warrant is correct, screening of the individual to see if there are any wounds. The informing officer is the first point of contact. From the medical side, he would speak with the individual, examine him, and after that he would make some entries. All new committals are supposed to be put before the prison medical officer the following day after the informee sees them. But we will appreciate that the numbers of persons that we have, that is not always possible, but we try our best for them to be seen by a doctor. Some of them, as the goodly doctor just said, there are people who are very non-compliant for their own welfare. And we have a challenge sometimes with that. An individual will come here and tell you, I don't need you to check me, I am healthy. I don't want anybody to tell me open my mouth or your eyes. They just want to be left alone. So it is not as easy as in the public practice. Within the prison, you have some rebellious people, and you have to find a middle ground. What sense would it make you try to restrain an individual to examine his mouth and end up in some confrontation where the inmate is injured than leaving him alone? And do just a external screen. If you ask him to pass urine, he may not want to pass any urine. These are the unique situations in a prison, and unless you work in that environment, you wouldn't understand these things. It's a constant communication and trying to talk down rather than beat down an individual to get him to cooperate, and it takes time. A man who has lived all his life being violent, killing people, raping people, is not an easy subject to handle. So sometimes when persons talk about professional, I often ask myself, what professional are they talking about? The professional is a prison officer. 30, 40 years working. He could watch an individual and tell you what he's up to, of years of experience.
Okay. Let me ask.
There has to be a follow-up, you see, because if you say that the prison officer can watch somebody
No, I'm just saying.
and know what he's up to.
Don't get carried away with that.
Okay,
I am just telling you the benefit
I think he
of
was just being
experience.
a little bit informal, but
Yes.
we take the point that experience counts for a lot
Counts
in
in.
terms of looking at it.
But we have formal processes.
All right.
Rest assured of that. As I said up front, we have doctors, we have psychiatrists, we have psychologists, plus we have access to the external clinics.
Let me take a comment from Dr.
Yeah,
Ram
to
Tahal and
answer
then a question from
directly.
Vidya Gaidi.
As you know, one of the WHO's slogans is there's no health without mental health. No? But we say that, but we don't really take it in. No? But mental health is just as important, or perhaps more important than, well, I wouldn't say more important, just as important as all the other areas of health. So, like the person is assessed by the doctor for physical conditions, the same should happen for the psychiatry side of it or the mental side of it. They should be assessed by a trained person, and if not, it will be missed, or most likely it will be missed. So that bias and that, that biased view of mental services and mental health is quite a historical thing that has been going on for hundreds of years, but it's not really getting better with time, significantly. So persons are not given the psychiatric attention like they should be getting,
So,
Thank you.
Mrs.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Nicolo, you were speaking about personality disorders, and you have listed some as minor depression, acute psychotic episodes, schizophrenia, and so, and we would deem it as being functional. What about those issues mental health issues that are organic, meaning remandees who have a bleed in the brain or have a tumor. Are those remandees screened at all, or you have said you have done certain number of remandees, you have assessed certain number of them. Have you at any point in time, any of these remandees presented themselves? Or you have decided, okay, let's do some random checks and see these behaviors, perhaps they're altered not because of functional, but because of organic. Have any of those been screened?
First of all, I would like to at least suggest that that distinction of functional and organic has been done away with. All mental disturbances are organic. They have a molecular basis in the brain. We do know that behavior, environment, and trainings impact. And coming specifically to those who have what you will now call organic because of tumors or space-occupying lesion, that goes under the purview of medical, and the psychiatrist is trained to pick that up if somebody is disturbed by their presence. And you will be surprised that the biggest brain tumors do not cause any psychiatric problem. You understand me? And the worst psychiatric problem are in brains that look healthier than you or mine on MRI and things we do. You understand? And when they do happen and they come with headache, can't move an arm or everything, it will be obvious to a prisons officer that this person is not moving the way they should move. They're not coming out for morning this or that. They will pick them up. And they will be in an extreme minority, to be honest, those kind of patients. You understand? But what I was trying to forward on is what the prison commissioner said about the prison population being a unique population. And maybe you all mightn't have heard of it. They've done studies in the past, and they've come up with a syndrome, for instance, called Ganser syndrome, which occurs in incarcerated persons, where they have this need not to give the correct answer. If you are even bold enough to ask them, how many legs does a dog have? They will tell you, they will think hard and say 3. In part of negating or giving approximate answers. So a lot of screening tools may not even be very relevant, as he said, because if somebody does not want to share with you, your screening tool is as good as the person answering. And nothing trumps a neutral, natural observation of a difference in a change of behavior, which is what I'm trying to say, because we have to know the extent and limitations of what we are going after and the resources that we do have. Because any psychiatrist will tell you they've met clients who you come to interview, and they answer no question. They say nothing, and they watch you, and at the end, you haven't gained anything. And they do tell you he behaves somehow, he withdraws, he doesn't know, and he comes and he watches you and doesn't answer your question. So psychiatry is very intricate, and there is a lot of training that goes into being an observer of prisoners over years, as the good officer said. All patients come to the psychiatrist because their relatives, people in the street, lay people bring them. Psychiatrists don't go home and screen anybody. They bring them because lay people say something wrong. We all are fairly aware of what is normal behavior, and we tend to quickly pick it up.
Yes, but my question is, do you all do any random screening to see, okay, this behavior is sort of awkward, untoward, and it might not be functional, but it might be something different?
Random screening. Yeah. No, what I'm saying is the screening lives with you. If you call your person to come and have breakfast, to go and bathe, and they behave other than normal, that is the screening. You will see it. You don't call them and say, line up, let me screen you, or randomly pick up people. The conditions, mental illnesses, the significant ones don't hide. You will be able to pick up that this person is moving a how, as they will say, and call the attention. And even so, you can only get a fraction of them, because some will insist they are well and they don't want nothing to do with it. And even in prison now, we have a few inmates who are seriously psychotic and will not take any medication. It takes a lot of fight.
Could we have Dr. Ram
to answer your question, psychiatric conditions, illnesses, they are diagnoses of exclusion. That means, technically, when a psychiatrist sees a person with behavioral problems, he is supposed to do all the testing that is possible to exclude all other medical illnesses, including tumors, strokes, epilepsy, every other thing, space-occupying lesions, before he could then say, this patient has depression or this patient has schizophrenia. That is the way it is supposed to be done. We may not do that here all the time because of resources. So in the little experience I have, the answer to your question is no. That sort of in-depth testing, like an MRI or a CAT scan on a prisoner or a remandee, is not done.
Mr. Husbands?
Again, in modern day corrections, there's evidence-based approach to doing things. And the whole aspect in terms of having those sort of tools become very, very significant. And it not be done in terms of a procedure, it not be done in terms of a routine. Again, yes, we may use our own judgment and we can identify, right? But there are tools now, particularly the dynamic factor identification tool, a modern tool in all corrections that pick up cues. It wouldn't identify if you have personality disorder, but it pick up certain cues that would help the individual to indicate that this person needs further assessment, and that is done every 3 to 6 months.
Mr. Chance?
Earlier on, Mr. Mose had asked a very important question as it relates to the prevention while person is incarcerated, how mental illness can be prevented, or if over time in the system can mental illness be developed, and what kind of approach or preventative measures or instrument, I guess, they're trying to assess as it relates to that issue. Now, if you look at our current remand system, it's almost like an oven for creating mental illness or depression. That's the correct.
And I want to just stick up in right there, because that was the crux of my first question. And I want to ask you, having said that, what justifies that statement you've just made?
What justifies?
That statement you've just made, that it's almost a greenhouse for producing mental illness. Why would you say that, and do you have data to support that?
I don't have any kind of data, empirical data, to support that from a scientific perspective. It will be on assumption, but it's something that could be undertaken to be able to validate the perception. But if we look at what Mr. Husband is talking about, modern day prison correctional institution, if we look at our prison current system and situation, prison environment, our current prison environment, our lack of proper prison infrastructure and modern design. I have attended international functions where I listened to a psychologist put perspective and recommendation as it relates to purpose-built prison to address and alleviate some of those issues, from as far as colors that is used within the prison to treat with rehabilitation and stabilizing people. The prisons, in terms of how it socializes inmates, how prisoners are socialized, inmates are socialized, especially if they are there for over a period or lengthy period of time. If it is not socialized in a humane and best practice approach, given the kind of losses and impact and trauma and what have you that inmates undergo while incarcerated, if the system does not support it from a proper infrastructural perspective, it can lead to the development of various disorders. You have programming and the lack thereof for persons while incarcerated. All of these are factors that can lead to an increase, and I say there is no empirical, but all of these are factors that can lead to persons falling ill to various mental illness or disorder. So those are things that I think, given our present and current circumstance where the Trinidad and Tobago prison is concerned, need to be taken into immediate account if we have to address the current circumstance faced by inmates in the Trinidad and Tobago prison, which have given trigger to this discussion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chance. I will just give Dr. Nicolo a chance to weigh in on this, and then we'll take a question from Mrs. Jennings-Smith.
Yes, I would just like to inform this body that the conditions in the remand yard and Trinidad and Tobago prisons is 10 times better than the conditions on the ward, most of the wards in the St. Anne's Hospital. So if the remandees, hopefully as they're trying to get better conditions, I hope the good committee should be able to extend this very heartfelt information that the conditions in the prisons are far better than the conditions at the St. Anne's Hospital. So whatever we're doing, I'm telling you, resources are really limited and has to pass through that too.
Are we referring to the remand prisons?
Said?
Are we referring to the remand prisons?
Say that again?
Sorry, are you referring to the remand prisons? When you say the conditions at the prisons, you're referring to the remand?
The remand, the condition in the
maximum
remand
security?
is better than the condition on Ward 8, Ward 5, and some of the major wards where people are kept in St. Anne's. And it will be a miss of me not to say this.
Okay, I know that there's going to be a tendency right now to comment on this, which will take us away from our substantive...
No, I just want to drop it, not to comment.
I know you dropped it.
Not to exploit.
And having dropped it, I want members and representatives to resist the temptation to go, for now, to go in that direction, because that actually may be a whole inquiry on its own, all right? So let us rest that just for a minute. It's very interesting that you would have raised that particular point. Let us take the question now from Mrs. Jennings-Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. My concern is really on the programs that are afforded a remandee. And I want to take us back to who is a remandee. A remandee is a person that we have in our care awaiting the completion of a trial. And from a survey that was done on remandees, it showed that anger and frustration, violence, depression as outbursts are some of the main challenges or behavior patterns in the prison's service. Now, I looked at some of the programs and I wondered, and I want some clarity. The programs that you are offering at this point in time, are they diagnostic? Were they mandatory? Or do they go to the programs as they feel to?
This is specific to the remandees programs, right?
I'm speaking about the remandees and the programs afforded to the remandees.
The programs do not have to be mandatory. The demand for the programs outweigh the availability. That is how much that the inmates want to attend the programs. So we don't necessarily have to force anybody.
I see the majority of remandees, they attend programs in mediation, religious, and school living, and little emphasis or little attendance on programs which relate to sporting activities, cultural activities, the impact of music. Could you tell us, if there's any intention to reverse that pattern?
That is going on right now. We have had 41 remanded inmates successful in their CXC examinations not too long ago. We have futsal, the first well-organized futsal program in Trinidad and Tobago, run by Clayton Morris, we call them soccer warriors, foot persons, in the prison with remanded persons. We have, and that is something now we're trying to create a policy out of another joint select recommendation, because the last commissioner, Mr. Stewart, he used to give a wider berth in terms of the remanded persons accessing certain things. We are in the process of amending the rules. A remanded inmate supposed to be held by us for the court, The police is responsible for taking them and bringing them. We are not supposed to do much with remanded persons. To be that what we do, we cause them to write or sign a document agreeing to. They're not even supposed to work according to the rules. Right? We have found a way to cause them to sign. They go to school, they play music, they engage in sport. So that is
Well,
the response.
you answered my question because certainly it is not mandatory, but based on their feelings if they want to attend
Volunteer, they have to.
Okay, good.
Just to follow up to that question, you said that there's a greater demand than supply.
Yes, it
And
is.
I wanted to know if there are any partnerships with government agencies or ministries that can help to alleviate the lack of supply on the end of
Well, the supply I'm
courses.
talking about here is space and facilities. And fortunately, let me give some kudos to the Minister of National Security. Over meetings, I was involved. He managed to encourage the cabinet to find $54 million to renovate the remand facility. So we must give him kudos for that.
In that renovation, would that address the issues of space
Yes,
for
it will.
provision of courses?
Yes, it will. But let me give you some information also. The last administration had drawn up plans for a purpose-built remand prison. And we were going along appreciating, awaiting it, and it never came to fruition. That could have made a big difference because a purpose-built remand facility will cause you to do a lot that you cannot do now, in terms of libraries, in terms of classes, in terms of recreation, in terms of families. That is a very serious thing that we look at. Being able to reunite families. Somebody locked up in a prison for 10 to 15 years without any kind of close relationship with their family is a serious thing. If you come to one of our Father's Day program and see how children hug their fathers, and it removes this hostility from their heart.
Could I just interject and ask Mrs. Jennings to finish her question so that you
Okay.
can address that?
Yeah, I have a concern because I asked you previously as to your programs with regard to remandees.
Yeah.
And you just said they spend sometime 8 and 9 and 10 years. And you also said that the programs are voluntary.
Yes,
But
they are.
remember, I preceded my question by telling you the percentage of these people, remandees, who are exhibiting tendency of hatred, violence, and those type of things. And if you are saying that the programs are voluntary and they are released back into society, and with the percentage of criminality we have in society, how do you intend to deal with that differently? Because surely, when those persons are released into society, having been in a place where they were given the choice to volunteer if they want to be in a program of music, culture, whatever, to change their mindset and to deal with their tendencies to be angry and hatred and all those things. If you said the program is voluntary, then, and I see here 1%, and a survey that was only 1% ticked up on football and those things, right?
Where that survey was
Well,
done,
I shouldn't really be using that.
well,
That's really an in-house survey. But I'm going on the point that you said voluntary, right? Are you confident or are you satisfied that by saying you have voluntary arrangement for persons who are there and a large percentage in hate and anger, are you satisfied that you are meeting the needs of the demands of the external environment, that when they are sent back out, they are sent back out in a peaceful manner or change or anything like that to impact on crime and criminality?
let me answer it this way. You use the word choice. It's not choice, it's right. We have to obey the laws of the land. And this is why I said earlier on, all of us have to come together. The parliamentarians, those people who make the laws, Sometimes you talk to the minister and tell him the necessity for changing a piece of legislation. And because of the politics, it stays for years. The remand people have their rights, but deal with the essentialities of what you're speaking about there. It's better to convince a man than try to force a man, because these persons, you have to understand how they live. You talk about bitterness and whatnot. There are areas in Trinidad and Tobago more bitter than any place in the prison. You can't walk about there. They will shoot you, they will rob you. Right? So it's not, the connect between the prison and the society cannot be overemphasized. And that takes a lot of consultation in order to deal with it. What we do, we encourage spirituality, and a number of persons, you know, in this world of academics and all what have you, tend to discount spiritual man. But we have seen some hard nuts change, got baptized, and are living a different life. And there are persons who try to access them with all the academia and all the diagnosis, and just something about an individual connecting a man to his God, and totally change.
Okay, Mr. Jensen, you have one more question?
Just one more. So we spoke a lot about mental and persons challenged with mental illness. In your experiences in the prisons department, could you tell me, like, out of every 100 prisoners, how many are mentally challenged?
That number is small. I work in Infirmary for more than 15 years. I was an infirmary officer. I took people to Dr. Ram Chahal, to El Dorado Road, to St. Anne's, wherever there were psychiatric institutions, specialized persons. And I have seen persons got their life back together. Some persons were not fortunate. But I think the best cure for the ills of the society is that we have become too cold. Love is still the greatest healer. If we learn to love one another, Trinidad and Tobago could improve.
And as we are on that topic of taking people to different places for treatment, how many, you had mentioned that there are trained staff at the prisons who stationed there to deal with the remand population and so on. How many trained staff do you have resident at the prisons to deal with the issues? What is the ratio of the staff to the prisoners and the remandees? Remandees we're dealing with. What is the ratio of the staff, trained staff to remandees? And what is the ideal? Is there an international benchmark that it should be at? Where are we at? And what are the plans if we are not at the ideal to get there?
I will want to refer that question, please, to Mr. Lopez.
Mr. Lopez?
Yeah, Mr.
Let me just draw reference to a number you was looking for earlier with the total population, percentage under psychiatric care as it relates to the total population. We have a total of 4.03%.
Let me clarify, that's 4% of the remand or the general prison population?
Remand, the remand
4% of the remand population are under psychiatric treatment?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair.
Wait, hold on. I think he has to, he has a further answer to give us with respect to the ratio of staff to remandees, and if that is close to the benchmark, any international benchmark, and if it's not, how do we get, is there a plan to get to that point?
Well, we can't compare it as against an international benchmark because simply we don't have that information. But the ratio of officers, trained officers to inmates, we have a total of 12 to 73.
Trained officers being psychiatrists?
No, we have 3 PMOs, prison medical officers. You have 4 psychiatric nurses, 3 psychologists, and 2, we have 2 attending psychiatrists from St. Anne's.
Okay. So in
And we have a
terms of,
total of about 84 infirmary officers who have basic training in identifying and basic management of people presenting with mental illnesses. They identify and they refer to the PMO, who subsequently, after assessing the patient, refer him to the psychiatrist.
I just want to make something very clear in my head. You have 84 prison officers who are trained to detect basic mental illness.
Yes, ma'am.
That training was supplied by the Ministry of Health in the courses referred to a little bit earlier by the commissioner, sorry?
Yes, ma'am. And the basic training we get at COSTAT, that is part of the module. That's one of the modules.
Okay, so 84 prison officers who are trained to pick up that initial, but that is for the whole prison, right? That is for the whole prison population in general, not specifically for remandees, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
To answer part of your question in terms of the adequacy of what we have, I will say no. There's room for improvement. I would like to see the training practicum that we had with St. Anne's restarted. That did a lot in terms of competency.
Could you just indicate for us how long it's been in abeyance?
I will have to check that because I've been out of the infirmary for quite a while.
Okay. And it was a program that trained on a yearly basis?
Continuous basis.
Continuous basis. Dr. Ramtal, do you have input there?
That was a one-off thing done by ourselves and a team from Dalhousie about 8 or 10 years ago, which went on for a period of maybe a few months and it was then finished. So that was quite a one-off and not really a ongoing over the years, over the last 10 years. That was quite about 8, 10 years ago.
Is there another program you're referring to, Commissioner, then?
No, that's the same program, but we knew the benefits because after the persons were trained, some of them went on to do further work in psychiatric nursing and things like that. So I'm saying is we need to meet with the Psychiatric Association, and if we could have that program we started, that was quite helpful to us. Or anybody else who could provide that service.
All right, I'm just trying to get it very clear. There's a one-off program 8 to 10 years ago that trained prison officers to be able to detect basic mental health problems. How many officers were trained in that program?
You could, Mr. Dr. Ramtal?
An approximate number?
That's quite a lot, you know.
I can't remember, but it could be 50 to 100. I'm not sure really about that.
That's quite a lot.
Okay. And they underwent this program for a couple of months. Yeah. But subsequent to that program, 8 to 10 years ago, where you had, let's say, the maximum number, 100 trained, what other training has been given, apart from persons' private training, what other training has been given or offered to prison officers to assist in this regard? Or has any been offered?
Yes, through COSTAT.
Okay. Now, what type of training is that through COSTAT?
That's in paramedic. That is a program geared to prepare the infirmary officers to function in the medical area. So it wouldn't only be psychiatric in nature.
Okay, and that is something that they undergo through the prison service,
that's
like
right.
an in-service type program.
That's right.
Okay, and it is out of that program then, and whatever the remnants of the program 8 to 10 years ago, that you would now have those 84 officers who are within the system and have been trained in that regard.
But it is ongoing.
Right.
It is ongoing.
Okay, I think, Mr. Lopez, you may have more of your answer you wanted to give.
No, that was the end of that one.
That's it? Okay.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. There's a follow-up. I have a couple of others, but a follow-up with respect to these prison officers, and I'm glad to hear that the prison officers are subject to a formal training program. I think that dealing with that population, you do need to be formally trained to handle the various idiosyncrasies of the behavior of that population. And
posing a question to both the Commissioner and Dr. Nenkolo, and that is, Dr. Nenkolo indicated that the majority of patients who are suffering from some psychiatric problem are brought in by regular people, brought in by the lay people. And I'm simply wondering whether Dr. Nenkolo can, as a trained psychologist, is that possible to provide a module where not only officers who are working in the infirmary, but officers who are interacting with the inmates on a daily basis can be exposed to some rudiments of your profession, so that while they feed them and they speak to them and they take them out, they are able to basically be your first responders and to be able to tell the infirmary officers, the 84 of them, or the trained psychiatrists, that we think in cell number 5 there is a patient you haven't seen that you may want to evaluate. Is it possible for you, doctor, to prepare a module for lay people so that they can be exposed to some of the things that they should be looking for, so that all prison officers are then subject to the kind of training that is necessary, and that therefore the entire remand population can be subject to some kind of continuous evaluation? And that is from, I'm asking you as a professional, if that is possible, a module that you and your unit can prepare, as opposed to COSTAT, and for the prison commissioner, whether in fact he is of the view that that kind of training, or for all of his officers, should be part of his training module for corrections officers in Trinidad and Tobago. That's the first question.
Yes, it is possible if it could be linked with this training he spoke about in COSTAT as a continuous process. It is possible for a professional, a mental health professional, to generate such a module, you know, as it is introduction to psychiatry or detection of mental illness, as it may be. If it is for the general prison officers, you understand, it will be useful, such a training module.
Dr. Murray, I just want to ask a direct question on this. In the development of the program at COSTAT, there is a module that deals with that type of situation, mental illness and so on. So what I want to ask is, seeing that you have asked, could there be input? I'd like to ask, how then, what was developed at COSTAT, who gave the input there to develop that program that they currently undergo?
Over the years, it started with Spain hospital. We started training our medical people many, many years ago because we saw the need. We used to call it the program, a paramedic program back in those days, where you were taught almost everything from emergency care. So if an inmate collapsed, you'd know how to check the airway, what to go to first, and all that kind of thing. And then it developed over time into this COSTAT program. In terms of adding an element, I think it would just be up to discussion and need. This is why I keep emphasizing stakeholder interaction in order to meet the challenges. Because to live means to say you have to evolve. As new demands come your way, you have to deal with them. So I would be very supportive of any additional criteria, training, support that could cause the officer to perform at a more professional level. But I must remind you that infirmary officers are on call 24 hours, 7 days a week. There's never a period of time in the prison where there is no access to welfare to an infirmary officer. Infirmary officers work from batches around the clock, and the PMO is always on call.
Thank you. Dr. Murray?
Could I? Yes.
Sure.
Just
Dr. Ramtahal.
Just one quick response to that. I know for a fact the prison service has been going abroad, and it's part of the IPCA that develops best practices. And that is an avenue where you can actually get a module for the training for staff in that particular field, mental health, whatever field, right? And they can also provide with the whole module, which could be incorporated in our developmental training.
We have about 30-something psychiatrists in Trinidad and Tobago, and we have a department of psychiatry at UWI, an academic department headed by Professor Hutchinson, who's right here at the back. I just saw him when I turned around there. But I don't know that any one of us is involved in that COSTAT program now. So I'm not sure what happens there, and I just don't know anything about it.
I therefore recommend, since Dr. Nkolo indicated that the trained psychiatrist can offer some kind of guidance in a training module to all prison officers, may I then recommend that in the interest of the welfare of the inmate population, the psychiatrists interact with the prison authorities so that the training which you can offer from a professional level can then devolve onto all officers in the prison service in the interest of the inmates, so that we will be complying with international norms and international best practice. Because you see, I was under the impression that the common man could not be exposed to training to evaluate mental illness. But Dr. Nkolo was very clear that he can train individuals to look for certain things so that they will be the first responders. You see, what Commissioner indicated was that the infirmary officers are available 24/7, but someone has to tell the infirmary officer, someone who is seeing the incarcerated individuals, to say, we think there is something amiss in a particular person in a particular cell. And this is what I'm after, is that all officers should be trained so that they will be able to call these infirmary officers on a 24/7 basis.
Let me caution you a little bit here. This is just the reductionist view of psychiatry, or the biased view of psychiatry. Nobody asks laypersons to go and look for illnesses of diabetes, hypertension, strokes, Cushing's disease, and all these other medical illnesses now. So somehow psychiatry is viewed differently, where some persons seem to think that they are easier to diagnose, or because they are behavioral in nature, they are somehow different and somehow more accessible to the layperson. But there's no program in this world that asks the layperson to screen for other medical illnesses. Now, I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
Right, and these are complex illnesses.
Could I just interject? In the same way, if I'm following Dr. Mahavir, in the same way that there's a paramedic course, which is not a full medical degree, I am looking at this as the same type of exposure that can indicate that there is a problem, not necessarily go to the diagnosis state, but indicate that there's a problem and therefore that person needs to be referred. So I'm thinking that that is the approach that Dr. Mahabir is suggesting.
Exactly the approach. And I understand that the psychiatrists as professionals will have their issues with lay people, but you see, when we are crafting solutions are not necessarily perfect. We will not pick up all. In fact, we may include some people who are normal. But my view is, unless those who interact on a daily basis, as if we have relatives, we interact with them on a daily basis, and if they are not right in terms of what we expect as normal, it is our duty to kind of tell a medical doctor, could you just check it out? I am not diagnosing, but I feel something is not right. And I'm simply looking at the psychiatrists in Trinidad and Tobago to determine from them whether, and I have to go to my second question, but really I think as a solution, not a perfect one, solutions are never perfect, but is it going to be beneficial to the inmates, the remandees, many of whom are going to be incarcerated for 10 years and more, that the people with whom they interact on a daily basis keep an eye out, because we only have 6 or 7 psychiatrists servicing a population of a few thousand. So the economics of the thing is that if Dr. Nkolo can provide that particular training program, then maybe we will be able to catch a bit more people who are currently being excluded and who may be languishing for 10 years in remand. But my second question is this. So that's for you all, the professionals, to consider. That may be a recommendation of the committee. But my second question is this. Again to Dr. Nkolo. Dr. Nkolo, because at the behest of the committee, I, together with members, visited the remand in Golden Grove and the remand in Port of Spain. And on another committee, I had the opportunity to visit the psychiatry department in St. Anne's, where you are housing those with criminal charges. And I tell you one thing, when I saw the remand conditions at the Golden Grove, from what I saw, it was scary. 9 individuals in a cell sometimes. I'm speaking to one of them. I don't know how many are in the cell, and then a few of them from the back come in, and it's dark, the lighting is poor, ventilation is inadequate. I want to ask you, sir, and I wouldn't want to compare both. Both of them are equally bad. It is like a rock and a hard place. But with respect to the psychiatrist, what effect does overcrowding do to the mental health of someone? This is for Dr. Ram Tahal as well, because in your profession, you probably do have some studies with respect to the space, confines of individuals, and I'm coming to craft a solution. But what is the effect of overcrowding and confinement for 23 hours of the day on the mental health? So I'm talking about someone who comes in. He is a lawbreaker or potential lawbreaker. But the condition under which he is housed, I would like to know what contributing factor is that to his mental health and well-being, and what kind of mental problems can arise when he is confined in a space with 8 others, for extended periods. What are the studies telling us?
Yeah, there are ample studies that have looked into overcrowding, even in prisons, you know, and the positively correlated with development of mental illness, aggressiveness, depression, you know, especially. So it does impact on any population of people, be it socially, people who live in crowded situations, in refugee camps. They have studies here and there that have positively linked overcrowding with mental health issues.
Okay, but what kind of issues that would arise directly from overcrowding? What
Specifically, depression, adjustment disorders with depressed mood, agitation, and violence, you know, which are not diagnoses in themselves, but behavioral anomalies like combativeness, fighting, violence, you know, could arise in such situation. And for those who are unable to cope, it definitely could lead to depression.
Well, let me just interject here, though.
Yeah, sure.
Because we asked this question earlier on, and the research you're referring to, that there's a correlation between the overcrowding and that, has that research been done in Trinidad and Tobago, or are we referring to international research that has been done that can refer to?
It hasn't, to my knowledge, been done in Trinidad and Tobago, but when it comes to overcrowding in that sense, human beings are similar, whether it's in Trinidad and Tobago. If it's valid in Guyana or Australia, trust me, overcrowding to that extent will be valid. You know, so when we talk about studies not being replicated here, there are certain studies that are universally self-evident. Overcrowding is one such.
And let me ask again, just in case it may have slipped and we can get a different answer this time to the same question. Is there anything to indicate then, any data to indicate that the occurrence of these types of mental disorders are greater in the prison population, specifically in the remand population, than in the general population? Because when I asked it before, the impression I got that there was no data actually saying that going into the remand prison with all the conditions that we know exist there cause you to end up with a greater possibility of having a mental disorder.
Yes, there are no data in Trinidad and Tobago, and certainly in those countries where they are diligent about data taking, I will presume that they don't have the sort of overcrowding that we have. You understand? So, but there are no data, local data to that.
Madam Chair, could I continue? Yeah. Yeah. Then a potential solution. There are mental problems which can arise. I'd imagine physical health problems, respiratory problems, and asthma and so on. But we're looking at the mental health. To the Commissioner of Prisons, you see, for the remand population, they are not guilty. They have simply been charged. And I'm wondering, since overcrowding is an acute problem in the remand yard, it's acute. I have seen the cells myself. It's not theoretical. How difficult is it for the remand population to have much more time outside as opposed to the 1 hour per day that the regulations allow them to give? Is it possible that they can be out for more hours in the day to play cricket and football, to walk, to mix and mingle? They have not yet been convicted, but what resources will you need, I should ask, to allow them to spend more time on the outside, as opposed to being in their cramped cell?
What we have done is to transfer inmates from the remand prison to the maximum security prison, which is more livable, it's more modern. You cannot put more than 3 persons in a cell because bathrooms and toilets are constructed within the cell. It's a more humane institution. So what we do, we transfer persons from remand to MSP. And more of that will be done
President Commissioner, I need to interject. That's not the question I asked. The question I asked was this: how difficult will it be for you, not to shift them from one prison to the next, but to give them more airing time, as opposed to being confined, whether it's in maximum security or in remand, give them maybe 4 hours as opposed to 1 hour? Is that going to be impossible for you to achieve?
It is not impossible, but this is why I told you about transferring. If you have 1,400 persons in one space, how much hours you could give each of them? You'll have to have them 24 hours. Because there are some persons cannot air with some persons. They are from different gangs. There are people who we have to separate. It's not just a matter of airing. So this is what I'm saying. The way the MSP is constructed, there are 4 different airing yards. So it is easier to keep people outside for longer hours than at the remand.
Follow-up question: at the maximum security prison, then, what is the average amount of time an inmate is allowed in the open air?
3 to 4 hours.
Okay. Very well.
Yeah.
One final question, Madam Chair. The final question is this, and again to the psychiatrists. We have spoken about the training of prisoners. We say it is possible. We have looked at overcrowding. We know that we could work into a program so that if they're nonviolent and if they are cooperative, they can get more hours outside. But now I want to ask the psychiatrists about this notion of living under conditions of uncertainty. In the maximum security, prisoners have already been convicted. They know they have to spend 10 years. They have reconciled. It's like closure. In remand, you don't know whether you are coming, you are going, or you're staying put. Some of you can leave after a year. Some can leave after 12, 15 years. The question I want to pose to the psychiatrist is this: what is the effect of living under this type of uncertainty on the mental health and well-being of a remand population? Uncertainty and mental health.
I would like to
while you're answering it, maybe you can tell us if the answer you're giving is a general answer, if it's based on any kind of data that's been collected, or if it's correlating with what you have seen abroad.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say now. That I won't be surprised that different psychiatrists may look at it differently, because psychiatry and philosophy have a very close interrelationship. Because some people might watch it that people in remand have hope. People who have been convicted have no hope. People in remand who are innocent and have been caught wrongly will be affected. You understand? Whichever way. People who are guilty may still have hope that this magic lawyer might get them out. So they are, certainly, I will expect that those who are convicted already will have a higher percentage of mental health issues. And that is granted that our police is not incarcerating or remanding a higher proportion of innocent people than warrant. So you see, it's a technical question that I'm sure you will be hard-pressed to find any study that has teased these factors apart. So it has to be on knowledge about human nature overall. And the people in remand have hope. The people who have been told they are lifers or they have 10 years don't have as much hope. It will now depend on how they cope or what kind of counseling they get along the way. So that's my view, but we have about 3 psychiatrists in the room. I would like to
That's
hear.
good. Just going to say, maybe some of the other psychiatrists may want to weigh in.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I could just give an opinion. I mean, I don't know of any study that has looked at that one problem of uncertainty about what is going to happen in the future, if you'll be there for 10 years or 10 months or 10 days. Psychiatric conditions like depression and others are caused by genetic influences, and they are precipitated in the main by environmental stresses. So it depends on the person, really. It depends on the resilience of the person, which sometimes is a genetic thing as well, and a combination of the two. So it's hard to give a good answer on that. It depends on the genetic resilience of each person. I can't really give a good comment on that.
Maybe, Professor Hutchinson, that is a part of the research agenda of the Department of Psychiatry, because for me, it is a critical matter. The reason is this: Trinidad and Tobago houses inmates for periods in excess of 10 years. It is greatly in excess of international norms. And that is a problem that seems to be peculiar to Trinidad and Tobago. So as a fellow professional, I think it's something that you can consider. What is the effect of this uncertainty in prison sentencing on the mental health and well-being of the inmate population of Trinidad and Tobago? Your response on whether you think it also is an important study worthy of investigation.
Yes, I think the length of time that they spend there, I think, is a critical factor. And I think it's a factor in all of the things that have been discussed. Because I think because the pace of the judicial system seems to be slow, the experience of those conditions is the uncertainty is really about the length of time you will have to experience those conditions. And I think that is where the challenge to mental health occurs.
One thing coming out from the last speaker is the importance of resilience building, environmental stresses. And I want to quote from the Commissioner of Prisons earlier on when you introduced yourself and you spoke of the whole deinstitutionalization in treating with access to clinics and stuff like that within the prisons department. And relative to programs to reuniting families. And I want to ask you if there are any non-governmental agencies that partner with the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service to provide programs and services to improve the mental health of prisoners on remand.
Many. You have the list of the NGOs? I have 6 pages of persons. That is to tell you the quantum of people that are eager to assist. They bring a different dimension. The inmates, after a while, they get accustomed to the officer or whoever is around, to see a new face. They get a different perspective, to know that somebody else outside there cares about them and is telling them that. They look forward to it. And we have found that there's a reduction in aggressiveness and breaches of the prison regulations as a result of that. I was telling an officer, when you look at, when last did you hear about an escape from the prison? Or any major riot? Or bloodshed? But I would want to knock to make sure that that continues.
As we all do.
Yes. So.
Mrs. Gopi Singh?
Yeah. Dr. Ramtahal spoke about environmental stresses, also impacts on the mental health of the remandees. What is the incidence, perhaps the Commission of Prisons may answer that too. What is the incidence of prison rape on the mental health of those remandees? And what it is that the Commissioner of Prisons or the Prison Service is doing to try to mitigate or to reduce the incidence of those?
It is a horrible act, because remember, you interfering with the masculinity or the perception of the manness of a human being. So those individuals, to start with, a person may get raped and may not even come forward. Mm-hmm. So what we do, but we is something that we do not take lightly. And in many ways, you know, they say out of evil cometh good. Because of overcrowding, it reduces it. Because there are many more persons in the cell, and somebody will speak up. As opposed to if 2 or 3 persons are in a cell, it can be more easily occur. It can more easily occur. We have found that that has decreased tremendously. 30-something years ago, when I joined the prison, there were some predators that you had to incarcerate differently. The minute they get mixed in the population, they would engage in that behavior. So you have to lock them down and lock them in a cell by themselves, which reduces your capacity to house the population, because there's only one individual you could put in a cell. But with the increase of visits and the inmates are allowed to talk in an open forum with civilians, to be labeled a rapist in the prison will have certain consequences for you. Prisoners frown on 2 persons in jail, rapists and child molesters. When they come into the prison, we have to house them separately. That is strange. Somebody will rob you, chop you, shoot you, but they'll hate you for raping another individual.
And does that really impact, Dr. Nicolo, does that impact on the mental health of a remandee? The rape, does that impact on
Definitely, they are human beings. Rape and such assaults of one's person will always have mental health consequences, adverse consequences. Mm-hmm. Yes. I said definitely that rape and such assault on persons' personal integrity will have adverse mental health consequences. It's universal.
And one divergent view I'm taking now, I believe the judiciary, the court would have sent certain persons to evaluation. How many thus far have been sent, and how many are still waiting evaluations?
But that would depend on the time period. What kind of time period?
From 2016 to 2017.
Dr. Ramtahal, I guess, will be in a better position. But people who come from magistrate court are usually processed within 2 weeks. They are processed and returned to the remand yard or prisons, as the case may be. And that goes on. Where we have a backlog is persons who come from the high court, as he said, who need more extensive psychological testing. You know, and in that area, we've really suffered a lot of backlog. And hence, now there is a backlog list that we aiming to attend to in a systematic manner. So I don't know if he has any information to give concerning this.
Well, about the same, we get patients from the magistrates' courts and from the high courts. So right now we have about 36 male patients there and 2 female patients today. With the resignation of a forensic psychiatrist recently, we had a little bit of a backlog, but Dr. Nicolo is taking up that mantle for now. No?
If I may, we have been discussing at length this issue of mental health, and the inquiry really deals with mental health, which is very important, as well as the issue of family life concerns. So I would like us to spend a little time now. I know time is fast spent, but just a little bit longer. And I want to engage Vision on a Mission. The remandees who spend many years, we have one of the the questionnaires coming in, speaking to quite a number of persons in the sample, spending between 5 and 10 years in the remand section of the prisons. What is the effect of this on their families? And what is happening to bolster that? Because one of the inquiries we would have done early in our tenure as a committee is looking at the effects on the children of perpetrators of violent crimes and so on, and how they are affected. And we would want to know what's happening for the families, and with specific reference to the children, because many of the remandees are in the age where they have young children between the ages of 1 and 10. And when we looked at the statistics presented from the questionnaires we gave out, we realized that there are quite a number of children who would be affected by their parent being incarcerated in remand. What is in place for those families, and especially the children?
I know Mr. Husbands would like to have an input, so I will just allow him, and after he completes, I would definitely want to have an input as well. So thank you very much.
Madam Chair, first I must identify there isn't a clear policy on what you call family life and incarcerated persons, as is done abroad, where they do a complete assessment in terms of the number of children, where the children are, the ages of the inmates who are on remand or convicted, and they have what they call an intervention, a family life intervention at 2 levels. One inside the prison, where it deals with family life, to see how it is impacting on the individual in the prison in terms of the social impact, in terms of isolation, in terms of his mental health and the like. But particularly towards the children, there's a lot of research, not locally again, but internationally, where the impact is very, very grievous. It's negative. It's impacted in terms of, one, social impact. A lot of those children are grieving, going through grief and loss, and they are trying to be secretive because they do not want people to know where either their mother or their father is at the moment, right? They also suffer a lot of what we call disorders from the trauma in terms of not having their mother or their father there. More than that, the research suggests they are the ones who get involved in bullying in the schools. They are the ones who are become prime targets for domestic abuse, for human trafficking. There's also the impact in terms of children, in terms of running away, because some of them have to go to caregivers. Sometimes the mother and the father, if it's the mother is there, the mother is able to provide adequately because the father may have been the breadwinner. So there's an aspect of that economic impact as well. But having said all of this, there's the whole sense in terms of they are at the highest risk of becoming delinquent or also becoming adult perpetrators. So that is the critical area in terms of how it impacts on the family life. Because family life has a lot to do in terms of what are the activities that a family will be involved in. And the fact that the father or the mother isn't there isn't that kind of bonding, adequate bonding. And those children develop what we call in corrections, they suffer strain. There are no adequate bonds to the family. There are no adequate bonds to education, no adequate bonds to work and valuing life. And they become very estranged. And more than that, down the road, there is that sense in terms of no adequate bonds to law, order, morality, and justice. So they are ones that are exposed to all these risk factors when they have a parent incarcerated. And without proper intervention from your social services, right, they're going to be that kind of detrimental effect. And as I said earlier, you may find them more represented in the adult institution when they become adults or young adults.
Mr. Chancellor, just before you're away, let me just indicate that what you're saying there came out in our deliberations at that inquiry when you looked at the children of offenders, and it was established at that point in time that there is no research being done to identify these children and to make any type of intervention to assist them so that they don't undergo and become, as you say, overrepresented. And again, there is no data either that would, except international data, that would give us some factors that contribute. But in Trinidad and Tobago, we don't have that data available to us. There's no tracking done of children whose parents have been incarcerated and how they proceed along the journey. So I just wanted to put that into the conversation. Mr. Chan.
Thank you. You answered the question there as well. I want to just go back a bit to Ms. Smith when she was engaging the commissioner as it relates to the remand preparation while remanded to reduce the incident of recidivism or reoffending. VOM works with the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service to provide resettlement service or reintegration service. We don't work, and I'm not privy to all of the different programs that exist in the prison. I know of a lot. I'm not privy or have knowledge of what exists to a great extent within the remand. However, I know we provide a great degree of service for persons expecting to go home, but that is more within the convicted division. I would want to know if persons remanded is not expected to return back to society, and therefore why not a preparation for release, even though there is uncertainty, why not there is a preparation for release for remand inmate? Because the challenges faced by persons convicted are also faced by persons who spent a lengthy time within the remand prison. And for most of those persons who come out on bail or after being acquitted and so forth within the court system, do approach the step of vision admission. But we would not have no kind of interaction, prior interaction of their criminal history or what would have taken place within the prison. And that creates a setback for reintegrating them and making recommendation for places of employment, etc. So I would like to make a recommendation in respect to the question Ms. Smith have put onto this panel in respect to inmates attending via convicted or remand program by choice, attending program by choice, but attend program based on compulsory. Because when inmates come into the prison and they are criminalized and they are involved in certain circles, the likelihood of that person coming and saying, officer, I want to change, is very, very small, right? They would try utmostly to remain within their circle. So it is the onus is upon the inmate, the officers, to be the motivator, to encourage those persons to assess programs. So if you leave it up to them, they would spend the whole 5 years, whatever period of time, just within the circles, etc. So I would like to see and make recommendation that the committee also look at passing legislation for the prison to have a greater hold in terms of those who comes in the system to participate in program by compulsory, and mainly as it relates to the preparation for release, because there's a whole regime, there's a whole module in terms of best practice within the criminal justice system. It's the last end of the criminal justice system. How do you take or usher back that person within the community? What are the practice? What are the procedures and steps? So I would like to see that take place, and that kind of preparation would allow us to engage their family, because at the convicted division, we would engage family with the welfare division of the prison service prior the inmate released. So we could see what's happening there and make whatever adjustment for the return of the person. If the person don't have the wherewithal to return, then we provide transitional housing program for that person, opposed to that person being released abrupt and have to face that in itself. Sometimes a man walk into a home where it is no longer welcoming, he meet new people in the home, could have certain triggers, even mental health triggers, and the possibility of reoffending. And we deal with that on a quite frequent basis. So preparation for release alleviate and reduces those kinds of incidents. So I would like the committee to take into account, if possible, as far as possible, recommendation to empower the prison to make programs mandatory in certain aspects, particularly as it relates to the remand of persons in terms of coming out of the prison, so that they could have the same opportunities as a convicted persons upon being released from prison.
Mr. Bruce?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'll just focus on the first question I was asked in terms of the family. The Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service has recognized the importance of family in, as Mr. Chancellor said, the importance of family play in reoffending. We have developed programs specifically suited for the remanded that will deal with issues like Father's Day, where the Prison Welfare Department, when they see the need either through the family or through the offender, where they will bring the family together to deal with issues. To focus on what Mr. Chancellor just said, a remanded person, managing a remanded person is different to managing a convicted individual. Every time a remanded man goes to court, he's of the belief he may be going home that day. Preparing someone for reintegration at that point, you can't prepare somebody for integration from there, because if he doesn't go home, how do you measure what's happening? What comes up is the length of time an individual spends at the remand. The length of time an individual spends at remand, it is really long. And I hear the ease, we say 10 years, 15 years. But that in itself is too long. A remanded person is innocent until proven guilty. They come with rights. Forcing someone into a program, I'm innocent, I didn't commit the crime. Am I going to the program? Am I admitting I'm guilty? All these things are taken into consideration by the inmate. And we must recognize managing a convicted inmate with a planned intervention in case management done through the LSCMI is different to managing someone who every time he goes to court, he's of the belief he's going home. Whilst he has hope that he may go home, but a convicted inmate knows he's going home. He knows the time, he knows how to plan, he plans with his family, and that support system is developed. And the works of the officers there to ensure, especially the Prison Welfare Department, the Programs Department, the officers who work on the lines with the inmate, they're trained in issues of motivational interviewing, so they would encourage inmates to be part of programs. And the separation of inmates is also important, where we have the classification to reduce harm to themselves and to others. And that continues within the service.
If I may just one contribution on that.
On the same issue?
Yes.
Here, that we just ventilated for a little while?
No,
a short intervention.
Yeah. Here is where your probation department, earlier I talk about a policy, right? And the aspect of community corrections. There's something in correction that they call pre-trial resettlement, where you prepare the person for the eventuality in terms of how long they may be there, but more than that, how you bridge the gap between the family who are outside and the individual. The person may still have housing, the person may still have business and the like. So that is the preparation in terms of pre-trial preparation. It's something that is now in vogue in corrections. Okay. Because of the length of time people are spending on remand.
All right, so we take that point as well. If I remember correctly, Commissioner, you would have referred to the fact that the prison has taken a decision to increase the visitation above and beyond what is provided for in the prison rules that exist since, I think it's 1940s? Also? Yeah? Okay. Could you give us a little more idea about that and why this decision was taken, whether it was with the family in mind and that type of situation? And if you would indicate, is there any consideration given for extra visitation for remandees with families? Or is it a standard thing across the board, whether you have a family or you don't have a family?
Well, the first thing I want to indicate, we have to disabuse our minds of the notion of what is family. There are challenges that we face that you wouldn't understand it until we sit down for about 5 weeks or so to talk about it. We have this concept of a family being a man, a woman, a car, a house, and a dog. There are all kind of permutations of relationships outside here.
Okay, let me just step in to clarify exactly what we're speaking about here. Mm-hmm. We're speaking specifically to the spouse or common law spouse or that
Girlfriend.
and dependents. Whether it is common law or long-standing girlfriend, what I'm asking is there any differentiation made? If you have a girlfriend alone, or if you have a wife, or if you have a wife and children, or children alone, is there any differentiation made? So I'm kind of trying to narrow down the family, which I understand could be very broad.
Well, we get difficulty in narrowing it down because Mr. Bruce spoke about, say, for example, the Children's Day. When we have noticed children have a way of touching men's heart. They may have problems with the wife. They don't want to see the wife. The wife may be with somebody else, but you will bring the child on that day, and that will do something in terms of changing that individual behavior. So we focus more on the children. When the welfare officer goes out to investigate this family, because the prisoner John Smith will tell you, I have 2 children, or I have 3 children, 2 with Jane and 1 with Mary. You have to make sure Jane and Mary doesn't fight when they come in the same space. There's a whole lot of background work you have to do. But we focus on what the prisoner tells us, because you do not want to create friction, and possibly when the inmate is released, he goes outside there and murders the wife or spouse or whatever you choose to call them. It's not as easy as just, there are a lot of background work you have to do.
No, what I'm asking is, you said you'll increase the visitation. I'm just
Yes.
asking, what was the basis for that increase? And just asking, is this the visitation standard for every remandee, or are there any considerations given for somebody who may have children or a wife or that kind of thing?
Yes, consideration is given. What you're asking, the genesis, right? The reason behind
Yes, I'm asking, how come you all increase the visits, right? And I'm also asking, every remandee gets the same visitation time and period, whether they have children or not, or is there any differentiation made?
The standard visit, all remanded inmates are given the same 15-minute, twice-a-week visitation. But what I'm talking about is the additional visit, what we call special visit. The rules provide for us to give special visit dependent on what the issue may be, familial business or what have you. But in addition to that, we have created days for children where the children are brought in and we have an activity, whether we have music, we have treats, we have bouncy castles for the children. We have also what we call a superintendent weekend visit for persons of good behavior. And that could be utilized also to influence persons' participation in programs. When we are talking about whether compulsory or volunteer, well, we know the law restricts you in terms of compulsory, but we could create incentives. And we do that.
Mr. Commissioner, I'm not clear with respect to the amount of visits. If I'm a remandee and I have a 5-year-old daughter, how often in the year could I expect the prison authorities to arrange for me to see the child?
That wouldn't be standard. That would be dependent on a request. And any inmate who, under stipulations, whether the child was born within 1 year of him, that's the rule. He could make a request to see his child. The welfare will investigate to see how plausible it is, and it is sent up to the seniors, and they okay it, and the visit takes place.
Right. From your experience, is it possible that someone with a 10-year-old can see that child after he has gone through the channels maybe 6 times for the year? Is that possible?
That is possible.
Okay, very good.
Let me remind persons, the old rule, and no, I shouldn't say the old rule, the rule is persons under 16 years are not allowed in the prison. I came into the prison and met that, and that's still on the books, because there's a school of thought that says those minors will be affected, psychologically affected.
Follow up on that. You see, and I understand that that may be a constraint. In fact, I spoke to many prisoners who indicated that they did not wish their children to see them in prison. And so I'm simply wondering, prisoners are transported on a monthly basis, once every 28 days, remandees, to go to court. So you have a process where prisoners are transported. Is it at all possible that prisoners may be transported to some neutral place where they can meet their child outside the prison setting in a secure area to have a box of chicken and chips and to spend 2 hours? It's something that fathers and mothers do on a regular basis.
Well, I don't think that is necessary because where we cause the children to meet the fathers are not in the cell areas, you know. It's either in the gymnasium or that kind of broad setting.
But Commissioner, they have to, I went to prison, and you should see the amount of gates I had to go through. And whenever you go, and I went as a visitor, right? So the children, and they know that their father or mother is behind 4 or 5 gates and has to come through there escorted. What I'm asking is to avoid any notion of incarceration, is it at all possible that you meet in a neutral setting outside the prison system where the children know that their parents are behind bars, but they are seeing them in as normal an environment as possible, so that some level of normalcy can be retained over the course of the year?
That will have posed certain security risks. I would prefer that. I went to a prison in Colombia, and there is something like a park on the prison compound. So there's open air street, there are benches, and you know, you're almost fraternizing. That would be a more manageable situation.
In the refurbishment plans that are proffered, the $54 million plans that deals with the toilets and so on, any spaces like that are envisaged for the development of any of those?
We have not done the design as yet. In terms of the question you asked, we have not done the design, but when I said just now purpose-built remand prison, these are some of the things that we would want to do. Environment influences behavior, ambience affects your psychology. So these are some of the things. We have partnered with the Correctional Institute of Canada. We have sent 14 officers to understudy their system. They have come to Trinidad and see our system, and we intend to remodel and modernize. We liked what we saw in Canada, so we are getting some assistance from them.
Let me just ask a question here. I know we're looking at the conditions for the prisoners, the remandees especially, because they have not been convicted and so on. We may not have the data here, but as data suggests that the recidivism rate and so on are reduced when all these conditions are made right and they have access to their family and so on. Is there data that suggests that that is what happens, and therefore that's why we're making all of these suggestions to move towards that, because we want to see a reduction in our recidivism rate that matches that kind of investment?
Well, two things. Internationally, there's data. University of Pennsylvania, I think in 2011, did something. We have anecdotal information. We are in the process of computerizing, so we could do some manipulations and make some projections and things like that. But from all anecdotal and academia would suggest, because it's something that you could reason yourself, you know. The more you treat somebody like an animal, do not be amazed when they behave like an animal. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Why it is violent crimes are mostly centered in impoverished areas, and non-violent crimes are created by a different echelon of persons.
But you know, there's a view, I'm not saying it's a popular view, nor is it the right view, that, you know, these persons may have committed wrong, and if they did not put themselves in these situations, then they would have to go through this, and the society is, you know, spending so much time considering their rights and ensuring that they are well taken care of. And some people, you know, tend to feel as though that's too much to be offered to that sector of the population. So that's why I was asking that, because if we are doing it, we're doing it with a purpose in mind, which is to reduce, generally to reduce crime. You know,
You're quite correct, and the public must see that, because there's always this competition for resources, and why they will, some of them have the view, why do you spend all these resources on people who have killed and raped and do people? And there are persons who have done nothing, but because of circumstances of life, they have no access to any. This is why I said that up front, without love and understanding the concept of love, we cannot have a properly ordered society. You know? We could do what we want.
And so we stay on the premise of,
Yes.
we stay on the premise that the persons we are referring to are persons awaiting trial, right? And they have certain rights. I want to know how robust is your program of intervention with respect to other ministries, Ministry of Labor, Social Services, Housing, because, and I want to refer particularly to the mothers out there who, when these men are incarcerated, they depend on them for their livelihood, taking care of the children out there. I want to know what programs you have or what programs you intend to have, or what are the present arrangements and how robust are the arrangements undertaken with the Social Welfare Department?
I'll briefly answer you and then I'll put it on to Mr. Bruce, please. Recently, we had 2 officers that were killed. The sword cut both ways, and they have children. And as a prison family, we came together in order to meet certain financial obligations. I don't know if you catch me. There are gaps in the system that do not provide for certain things in an appropriate and sufficient manner. But there are things that we can do, and I'll hand you over to Mr. Bruce to answer that question.
Thank you, sir. We have to understand the prison service has adopted the philosophy of restorative justice. No one is there to stay in prison, and they would come out. The recognition that the family support system is a strong system to keep somebody from reoffending, as Mr. Husbands would say, that's best practice. That study has been done throughout. Although it hasn't been done here, we could safely understand that in a family system, if somebody feels a sense of belonging, a sense of value towards that system, they would not likely reoffend.
I particularly asked you the question of the family support, whilst we have remandees, and the whole health, the mental health issue that when a person is incarcerated, and as Dr. Dominic had pointed out, he spoke about a person feeling that every day they go to court, the matter will be heard and they will not be coming back. And but what we have to think about is that person is innocent until proven guilty. But he is the head of a family. And whilst he's incarcerated, what's happening to that family out there? That's the thought that he knows that family is out there with no support. It could impact on his mental capacity. And I'm asking you, how robust is the intervention by the prison department utilizing all the non-governmental agencies as well as government department, like the social services, Ministry of Labor, and things like that?
We are very robust in that aspect, ma'am. Public assistance for the families that will assist the family to take care of the children. We also, on discharge, we have a simple incident of licensing officers where the person has to renew their driving permit. And we've received assistance from the licensing department in this, keeping jobs within government agencies because somebody would have been remanded for quite some time, and that job is important for them to continue living on release. So that system, that interaction, that cooperation does exist. Also with stakeholders, Vision and Mission, other halfway houses, even through COPCAM, they have assisted us. A rebirth house, they have provided resources to us to ensure that when an inmate comes out, or while that inmate is there, they provide the support system to ensure that the family system stays intact as much as possible.
And is all of this available for the remandee?
Yes, it is, ma'am.
Yes, it is?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, because but if I look at that in comparison with what was said by Mr. Chance, he was indicating that there are some things that are available for the those who are already convicted and are going to be released, and they are not available necessarily to the remandees who have been there for a long time. And so, therefore, the remandees who have spent a long time come out almost with no type of support or less support than those who would have been convicted when they are actually released?
Convicted inmate planning is different because there's an end. Remanded, the planning will be short-term and quick. Whilst Mr. Chance may talk about they come to his door and now he has limited information. Yes, because sometimes an inmate comes out to remand, he goes to court, he doesn't come back. He's released. He comes and he gets bailed tomorrow by someone. Those things they are not always planned. So the planning time is short and it's sudden.
Right, we understand that. I mean, it's uncertain, and that's what we've been, talking about, it's uncertainty. Just wanting to look at what, even in that prevailing circumstance, those have been there for a long time, how they take that sudden release. Because, I mean, every time they go to court, we understand they expect to be released. But if after 10 years, it's been going on, and if they are released, then, I understand your difficulty, because you would not know that they would be released at that time.
What happens, those same facilities are available. Someone may be released. He says, sir, my driving permit had expired. He's given a document that he could go to the license office. He would not have to pay the absorbent, he would not have to pay the fees for the length of period that he hasn't been driving. And that comes in handy because for some people, they depend on driving as a livelihood. So we make that available through the Prison Welfare Department, where inmates are referred to different departments for different levels of assistance. It may not be planned before as convicted, but at the short term, on release, the system is always available for an inmate.
All right, now I want to thank everyone really for their contributions, and I want to invite, if there are any last questions from members, then I want to invite the members who are here to give very brief closing comments, and we will take it in the order that we took the opening comments. So Mr. Val Lewis, Mr. William Alexander, Commissioner of Prisons. Then we will take Mr. Richard Madre, Mr. Wayne Chance, and Dr. Nkolo. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman and members of the Joint Select Committee. I think all of us have been very enlightened today, and therefore we want to thank you for this opportunity. I would also want to thank the other members here for sharing and for the contributions made. I would certainly want to thank the Prison Commissioner and members of the Prison Service, not only for the contributions here today, but for the work that they continue to do in the prison service. I would think that for remandees, our deliberations here today will only serve to improve their health and quality of life. We at the Ministry of National Security and indeed the Prison Service would want to concur with the World Health Organization's position that, and I want to quote, addressing the needs of people with mental disorders improves the probability that upon leaving prison, they will be able to adjust to community life, which may in turn reduce the likelihood that they will return to prison. And with those words, I want to again thank you, members of the committee, and we look forward to your report and certainly to recommendations as we in the ministry strive to improve on all aspects of our operations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Mr. Alexander.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, all those present and all those that are listening to us, we have a golden opportunity to make a difference in the lives of our citizens, and we must take that as an oath. We have to change the conditions and circumstances of some dispossessed persons in our community. Otherwise, the quality of life will never change for most of us. In fact, it carries a risk because as their numbers grow, our comfort, our ability to live freely will be compromised. I valued the opportunity to sit and discuss with persons from different disciplines. Some things that was said here today caused me to have a different perspective. I want us to never despair, but we are a talented people. Some of us may be underutilized, but I think if we come together, there's nothing that we cannot do. We could make a difference. I want to state publicly, on behalf of my prison officers, we are going through a very risky period now, but the majority of them are holding fast to their oath. They are coming out to work. They are dedicated to this service to their countrymen, to their country. Whatever hurt that they are feeling now, we will overcome. We will prevail. God is on our side. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Madre?
The Ministry of Health particularly takes note of the discussions on the subject of training and whether such training could improve the likelihood that mental health issues could be more readily identified for further investigation by specialists. We therefore commit to discussing with the relevant agencies and the specialists the viability and the validity of introducing such training programs. We also commit to working with UE to determine whether it is possible to incorporate into the research agenda the issues of mental health within the prison population and, of course, specifically within the remand facilities.
Thank you. Mr. Chance?
Thanks, Madam Chair, and all the members of the head tables there. And I want to also say thanks to the Parliament for the continuous looking at the risk and needs of the prison practitioners and the customers of the prison service to create a more humane and transformational system. I still want to leave on the record that the remand inmates definitely need a program to look at how they adjust and readjust in going back into the society. I thank all of you, and I send my condolences to the family of those who would have suffered demise recently within the prison system. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Nkolo?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and the members of the Joint Select Committee for having given me the opportunity under the ambience of the AP Association of Psychiatrists of Trinidad and Tobago. And we at the association believe that mental health is a community affair, and a psychiatrist sits like a cherry atop that pie, but the rest of the pie, which is the rest of us, the prison officers and members of the community, we all have a role to play in helping to attain the end of mental health for all as soon as possible. So we will continue to play our roles and try our best to assist any organization that may need such assistance from us. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just beg your indulgence to just summarize some of the findings that we have discussed here and some of the recommendations that have come forward. Some of the findings are that no routine psychiatric screening of remandees take place at this time. No baseline data regarding the remandees who have mental illnesses on entering a prison in Trinidad and Tobago is collected. No research is being done to determine the incidence rates of mental illness in the prison versus the general population of Trinidad and Tobago. The determination of mental degradation in remandees is left to prison officers, mainly, and reports of inmates, and this may be insufficient to accurately institute preventative treatment because problems may be picked up at advanced stages. Budgetary concerns and logistics may prevent the routine psychiatric examination, which may be desirable for every remandee. The treatment of remandees is a difficult process due to the behavioral patterns of remandees, which may reduce the effectiveness of any screening processes as well as possible treatment. There's not adequate facilities or space for provision of programs for remandees. Infirmary officers are trained at COSTAT to assist in detecting signs of mental illness. Many NGOs support the rehabilitation work of prisons for remandees and have a positive effect on the attitudes of prisoners. No formal family life intervention mechanisms to treat with the family and children of remandees exist, though international studies confirm that they are at high risk of becoming offenders themselves due to the mental strain and grief of having incarcerated parents. Preparation for release programs are not formally extended to remandees, though they may have access to some of them, and especially long-standing ones due to the uncertainty of their release times. And that there are some programs instituted at remand yard, including Father's Day programs, special days for children and families at the prison, and there are also opportunities for extra visits where possible. Some of the recommendations that have been advanced are that standard procedures to determine deteriorating mental health in remandees over their detention time are necessary. Support may be required to assist ex-remandees who have developed mental illnesses while detained, and partnerships and information sharing systems may have to be put in place. Psychiatric evaluation should be a routine part of the admission criteria or testing on entrance of remandees to detention spaces or prisons. Research must be done to determine if the conditions and length of time spent at remand yard in fact lead to the development of mental illnesses and disorders in Trinidad and Tobago. Funding has been approved for the refurbishment of Remand Prison, which will allow for more programs in different areas to be provided for the engagement of remandees, which may assist in preventing the development of mental disorders. More officers can be trained to detect basic mental illness, and both infirmary officers as well as those who interact with the general remandee population can be included. Training modules at COSTAT can be reviewed with inputs from the Department of Psychiatry at UE, the Association of Psychiatrists of Trinidad and Tobago, as well as the Ministry of Health. NGOs have to be encouraged and to continue interacting with the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service. Children of remandees should be connected to social services to provide them with support, both financial and psychological, etc., to mitigate the effects of mental strain which results from having incarcerated parents. Preparation for release programs to be open to remandees, particularly the long-standing ones, not necessarily compulsory, but available to them and recommended. Rules which prevent minors from entering the prisons need to be reviewed, and data must be collected to determine the effects of improvements in the physical infrastructure and programming of remand yard on the mental health and family life of remandees. Quite a mouthful, and I want to thank the representatives who were here for contributing in such a substantial way to our investigation, and I am certain that our report will bear recommendations that can both be fleshed out in the short term as well as the long term to improve the conditions for remandees with regard to their mental health and their family life. So I want to thank the members of the viewing public who are here with us. I want to thank the representatives and the members of the committee. And we've had really an extended session, but I think a very good one. And I want to declare this meeting now adjourned.